So in order to make a bow using the Easy Bow Maker, we're going to use, of course, a good pair of scissors. You may want to use a zip tie. That's totally optional. I use floral wire, and I know some people use pipe cleaners. However, I find pipe cleaners aren't long enough typically, so that's why I normally use the floral wire. This is a 22 gauge paddle floral wire. Of course, we're going to need ribbon. For this particular bow, I'm going to be using 5 different ribbons. And of course, ribbon you can find on my website at festivecreationsbystephanie.com, as well as the bow maker. Let's get started. So I am going to use this 2.5 inch ribbon, place it on the spindle on the left, and I'm going to measure out my first loop, or my tail, to the 6-inch mark. So on the bow maker, it has inches measured out for you. So I'm going to come out here to the 6-inch mark. I'm going to slide that down in between these 2 pegs. Let me move that just a little bit closer for you. And as I'm going down, I'm giving it a good twist. So now I have the pretty side on the right, and the ugly side is facing upwards. I'm going to come out to the 6-inch mark over here and hold that and measure that. And again, I'm going to slide my ribbon down in between the pegs and twist as I'm going down. Now at this particular point, let me move that out of our way. I actually moved my tail. So I want my tail to be going a different direction. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side. Come out to the 6-inch mark, give it a twist, and this time I'm going to twist it so that the tail itself is upright. So technically it really doesn't even need a twist on the outside. Look, one roll of ribbon gone. I knew that was the end of that one. Now I'm going to take my next ribbon and do the same thing. I'm going to start by measuring out, but this time I'm going to go to about the 5-inch mark, or even come in a 1/2 inch since I'm using 5 ribbon for this. Twist, push down, measure out to about the same spot on the other side. If you want to check your measurements, you can always come up and check it by measuring this way. And again, about the same spot. And push down, and on the last loop, you won't give it a twist. And I do like to kind of rearrange as I'm making this particular bow. Look, I am at the end of the roll on mini ribbons. I like that. This one's going to have some tiny paw prints, and I know for a fact that there's not a lot of ribbon left on this spool. So I'm going to only do 1 loop, a smaller loop. So I'm going to come in about another 1/2 inch because we are using 5 ribbon. I don't need a lot of loops. Just keep repeating this until we get to the end of all 5 ribbons. All right, taking our 4th ribbon, I'm going to come in just a little bit shorter than the one before. And it looks like that one flipped around, so we'll fix that. I like to make sure everything's lined up as I go along. All right. So I'm just going to come in a little bit shorter than the one before. And sometimes, depending on how many ribbons you have in your bow, I will do them the same length. So again, I can check to see if my loops are the same size. This one's a little bit larger. So I'm going to bring that back a little bit and cut my tail. For my final ribbon, I'm going to be using this black dog bone and paw print. And it's going to actually be the same size as this one, only because if I go too small in the center, it will bunch up. So especially when you're using multiple ribbons, sometimes you will have loops and tails that are the same size as the ribbon prior to it. and that's okay. Watch how this turns out. So this one is going to be about the same size as the plaid ribbon before it. So as I mentioned, you can use a zip tie if you don't have good hand grip. If you struggle with getting your ribbon to be tight in the center, then a zip tie is the way to go. However, I would still have a piece of floral wire on hand because we're going to add that into the zip tie so that you or your customer has something to attach it to. Let me explain. But first I want to show you kind of what this looks like from the side. You notice that I'm not smashing down the loops on the bow. I'm just pushing down in the center in between the two pegs. Now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to lift this straight up off of my dowel rods here. And as I'm holding it, I'm going to bring my zip tie in between the two wooden dowel rods, get it up close to my ribbon, and come up in between the center point where my dowel rods are at and connect my zip tie. So before I take it completely off, I'm giving it some security. I'm not going to tighten that zip tie down until I get this off and I make sure that all of my ribbons haven't shifted, that they're all laying the way I want them. So I'm just going to look at each one. Spread that out a little bit, make sure they're placed correctly. Then I'll slide this around the back and I'm going to tighten it a little bit more. But before I tighten it all the way down, I'm going to take that piece of floral wire and slide that in there. So the floral wire will be used to attach to a lamppost or a lantern or a wreath or whatever it is that you're using this bow for. If you sell bows or thinking about selling bows, I actually leave about 2 feet because the customer may want to wrap it around like a large handrail or something, that might be wide. I would rather give them too much wire to work with than not enough. So now that I have that floral wire in there, I'm going to tighten that down completely. And that ribbon is not going to shift. Now we can go back and make this a little pretty. Oh, actually, let's trim off that excess on the zip tie, and I'm just using some wire cutters. And now we can start making this a little prettier by dovetailing the ends. So all of these straight edges, I will go back and do what they call dovetailing by taking my scissors and cutting a V shape in the ribbon itself. Let me show you with the black one. It might show up a little better. So I just kind of cut at an angle towards the wire itself. I fold it wire side together and cut. And I'm going to do that on all of my ribbon tails. You do want to make sure that you have a good sharp pair of scissors when you're working with ribbon. In my house, no one is allowed to touch my ribbon scissors. It is the only thing, my fabric scissors are the only thing that I use them for is on my ribbon. And this pair of scissors I've been using for over 5 years and have never sharpened them. All right. Now we can start kind of fluffing the bow. So I'm just going to run my fingers along the edge and I'm going to pull up and give it some body. And I'm giving some tension on those wires. So if you're using wired ribbon, which we should always be using when we're making bows such as this, then the body of the bow itself, the loops, will hold its shape very well. So just fluff it to your preference. And now we have our beautiful bow that coordinates very nicely with this sign. And I will be making a wreath using this sign and this bow. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Let me know in the comments below if this has helped you with your bow making process.